Welcome. This is Carol from Skill Check. And today I have one of my favorite speakers to talk to and to jaw with, Jeffrey Greenberger. And we're going to be talking about serving our military customers and how important that is. Jeffrey, how you doing today?
Morning, Carol. I'm great. How are you?
Okay. I'm doing okay. It's one of those mornings sometimes, right? It's like, oh,
Happy
it's
to have the
wake up.
dynamic duo reunited.
Right. Exactly. So, you know, Jeffrey, I think one of the hardest things about being in self-storage and having the issue of, oh gosh, we've got military tenants, sometimes people or managers and owners too have said, oh, well, we won't rent to any military. And I just think that's really not where we want to be, right?
That is not where we want to be. And specifically, some states actually make that an item of discrimination. Um,
Yes.
and so, yeah, the answer is no. We don't want to do that. Even if it weren't illegal, which it is in many states, the social media aspect of it, the I despise this term, but the optics of it is horrible. And so
Right.
that's not the right answer. The right answer is to understand what you need to know about renting to military so that you can effectively do it, protect yourself, but still rent to qualified members of our armed services.
Right.
There's a nice poster at the Ohio Civil Rights Commission where I practice sometimes, and it says it's okay to discriminate as long as the color you discriminate against is green, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they don't have the money, okay.
Right.
They have the money. I've often joked in this industry, $75 in a pulse moves you in, and the pulse is optional if the 75 is cash. And so uh,
That's true,
that
isn't it?
that's the way we should look at it. We should rent to
Yeah.
everybody that's qualified. Now, certainly the issue today is military, and don't discriminate.
Right.
Don't refuse to rent to military.
Yeah. I think the other thing is, especially when I had Waikele self-storage, and well, I've had, I think six, well, probably eight total stores in Hawaii that I have worked with. Some ground up I've developed, and then, but others I just managed for others. But it's been amazing to me the number of tenants, especially at my store, Waikele Self Storage, because it was so close to all the bases. We just had so many people coming from the armed services. We felt like, we needed to make sure that the rental agreement requirements were there. And I think that was something kind of important, not kind of really
Yeah.
important,
Let's
right?
start with the basic one, Carol.
Yeah,
There's this federal law called the Service Member Civil Relief Act.
right.
You've abbreviated it on the slide as the SCRA. Same thing. If you're older, you might remember it as the, let's see, I think it was called the Soldiers and Sailors
Sailors,
Civil Relief Act.
yes,
Same act modernized. Okay.
right,
And one of the important things that every self-storage owner needs to understand is there's at least one requirement of the SCRA that no one can get around. And that requirement is when you're granting credit to someone, you are required to ask whether or not they are a member of active duty military, armed services, or arguably a dependent of such person, right? I'll go back to
right,
arguably in a few minutes, but this isn't meant to pick on self-storage. This is
right.
the same question that has to be asked if you're lending money for a car loan, if
Mhm.
you're granting a mortgage, if you're Verizon and you're making a credit decision to issue a cell phone on installment payments, anything like that
Right,
requires that there's a certain question that be asked. You put up a really good version of it. Okay. We break it down in our practice into two, right? Is the occupant someone who is in active duty military service, et cetera? And then the second question is the occupant a dependent of someone? And the reason is we just want a little more clarity about who. Now, the other way to solve that problem is to just say, if so, then who? as the next line after the yes, no.
Yes, that's a great way to
But
put that.
some form of this question has to be in your rental agreement. It can't be on a schedule. It can't be a posting in the office that says you're required to tell us if you're active duty military or not by federal law, right?
Right.
This question has to be in your rental agreement in and of itself. That the four corners of that document is the legal term. Oh, then you have to be able to look back at it if someone goes into default, and that's why it has to be there.
Yeah. I put that up in the section where it just has all the information that the customer fills out. Are you a member, or you or your spouse a member? It was just easier to include that in all of the data and the information we ask for in the top, and not bury it somewhere, on the back page or whatever.
Anyone who is active duty military, that definition means essentially anyone who puts on a uniform to report for service or train or anything else like that at least once every 90 days.
Right.
So, of course, Army, Navy, Air Force, active
National
duty,
Guard.
well, Space Force, all Coast Guard, all those branches of service are covered. Okay, and
Yeah.
Space Force is now covered. But also, as you said, that makes it include, this question include the National Guard and the reserves, and also, interestingly, some uniformed first responders of the National Institute of Health, and the NOAA, which is the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration,
Yes.
which is like the hurricane chaser folk, right? So
Right.
if those people are up in a plane chasing hurricanes all season, they may also be protected at some level. And we'll talk about what protection means. But the important takeaway from this point is that this law is going to apply to not only people who are overseas protecting an embassy or in a foxhole somewhere,
Right.
but also the desk jockey who works for the Army recruiting centers. Excuse me. All
Right.
are covered.
All are covered. Yeah.
Okay? The dependent part of this has an interesting definition. It first of all means any spouse, period. That's the end of the discussion. Gay, straight, whatever, under the federal law, a spouse is covered, period. But if not a spouse, you can also still be covered by this law if you receive 51% or more of your support from the active duty military members. So oftentimes it's the mother of a child or father of a child that aren't married, or maybe a girlfriend, boyfriend,
Yeah.
something like that. And that's where that question gets screwed up so much in online contactless rentals. People answer this question, yes, because they want a military discount, but they're not, in fact, a dependent of someone who's active duty. When
Right.
I audit files, and you probably run into this, you'll find people who are 80 years old answering the question, yes, they're a dependent of a military member, and you go to ask the question later, and they're like, well, yes, my husband served in Korea.
Right.
Your husband who's been dead for 20 years? Yes. Okay, well, thank you for his service, but don't answer this question. Yes, that's not the question we're trying to ask
Right.
by federal law. We're trying to figure out if you're protected from foreclosure currently.
Right.
Let me also very quickly go back to the statement I made a minute ago about dependents being arguably covered. That's because a dependent has to assert their right to protection under the law. It's automatic for military members. But what I tell my clients is assume every dependent is going to assert their protection to stop a lien sale.
Right.
And just treat it like they're protected automatically. I just don't want anyone to leave this webinar believing people are automatically, dependents are automatically protected.
Yes.
They're not, but presume they're going to assert their rights and just treat it that way.
If they have to, right? Especially if you sell their goods or want to.
They're going to assert.
Yeah.
They know enough.
Yeah.
But let's talk about other questions that are not required by law, but are required by Jeff and Carol.
Yes.
To be asked, because you're going to need this information and then we'll talk about the why in a sec,
Yeah.
right? First of all, if you're not otherwise asking your occupants to give you a full social security number, which by the way, I believe is a crazy mistake. I think you need it for everyone, but certainly if someone tells you they're military or a dependent, you need their full social security number because in order to verify their service later, let's say someone checks it and then 3 years later they go into default, well, they may not still be that status. It may
Right.
not be a yes, it may not be a no anymore, which is why I think you need a social security number for everyone.
Mhm.
You can check their status on
Aye.
Department
Yep.
of Defense Manpower Center's website. But you know, I run that other business, Late to Lean, and we do military checks as part of our service. It's just part and
Right.
parcel of what you get with us when you use us, but we can't guarantee results are accurate without a full social security number,
Right.
right? And the last four digits only, which a lot of people say they want to collect, narrows it down. I think someone told me to 33 million people. So not real narrow. You're not getting a
Right.
real good answer.
Right.
So you want to make sure you get a full social security number. This data changes. You can get accurate, updated information from the Department of Defense Manpower Center.
And
I
Jeffrey,
like
would
to
you
ask,
put that social security number in the software or just leave it on like on the rental, whatever they enter for the rental agreement? Does it
I
matter
never
how
put
we
it on the
take care
rental
of that
agreement.
social security number?
Right. Let it be encrypted in the software if the software will let you. Now, there are some softwares now that I think because they've been involved in litigation over this, do not allow you to put a social security number. They don't give you a social security number field anymore.
Right.
And so you have to create a workaround of where it can go and where you can encrypt it, right? You have to cheat the system.
Yes.
And that's unfortunate, but software programmers rule the world, not me. And so they've taken it out of some softwares. You still need it.
Right.
You want it somewhere behind an encrypted field that only the owner or head person, whoever that is, can look at. We also ask questions, or I recommend asking who the person's commanding officer is, getting their military ID number. Now, note, there's a conflict in the law. The military itself no longer cares whether you copy a military ID card because they're now, you know, the 2D barcodes and all that sort of stuff. It's all very encrypted on their end and it's fine. However, there's a federal law that says you can't do it. And it's actually an imprisonable offense.
Right.
So don't copy military IDs, even if the military says you can do so. Right. And
Right.
then again, we talked about this a little earlier. Are they the spouse or dependent, or are they the actual military member? You need to know that because relationships end,
Mm-hmm.
right? One way or the other. I mean, a lot of them do, especially boyfriend, girlfriend, someone who is a dependent now
Right.
could not be the dependent 6 weeks from now.
Yeah.
Okay. And so which one is the member of armed forces, reserves, National Guard, NIAH, NOAA, whatever, so that we know what we're dealing with. We care because the law says you can't foreclose on any lien of any protected person without court permission. Meaning, we have to, if we believe, if they check yes, and we go back and look at it, then we might check the SCR, the service members, the Department of Defense Manpower Center database. We'll go back and check it, make sure it's still true. But if they are somehow still active duty, or it's been less than 90 days since they stopped being active duty, then we have to go to court and say, Mother, may I, before we
Right.
can sit. And that's why you put this slide up, Carol, which I think is a great one.
Yeah.
That says the law presumes that we ask the question. It forces us to.
Right.
The law then requires the military member, the service member, to answer accurately. They can't lie and tell us no. But lot of our tenancies run 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years. Things change during those years. And the law imputes upon us, and remember, this law wasn't written to penalize self-storage. This
Right.
law was in existence in one form before self-storage was even a glimmer in someone's eye.
Hmm.
This law was really written to stop mortgage home foreclosures and car repossessions and things like that without a court order. But since we have a lien, and what we do when we enforce that lien is foreclose it, we're under that tent or that umbrella.
Right.
So if you cut a lock and the boxes inside say civilian clothes while I'm in the Army, if someone says to you, hey, you can't sell him or her, they're in the military now. I get statements on answering machines that say, you can't do this to him, he's serving his country right now. Any innuendo like that requires you to
Hmm.
then assume, yes, military, till you can disprove it by looking at the Department of Defense Manpower Center and finding out they are not, in fact,
Right.
active duty or dependent.
That's
Question.
why I really like the when you put this on the front of your rental agreement near the top that it says, "Are your spouse in the military?" When I do the just checking of all the rental agreements, if it's left blank, like that's or there's not a no on there, I'm like, wait a minute, we need to find out. We need to know, is this person in the
Right.
military or not? Because they didn't put anything down there. And it's one of those
I
things that I'm a bit of a um, tyrant on when I'm going through the rental
not
agreements.
being a tyrant because
I
I
know it's
personally,
thorough, right?
beyond getting the regular contact information and all the normal stuff you need on an occupant, I say there are three things that the manager needs to make sure is right on the rental agreement. Or, I mean, I don't mean to sound draconian, like first mistake, they ought to be fired. But if they're not doing it consistently, they should be discharged because it
Right.
exposes the owner to
Oh,
so much unnecessary liability. And one of those three things is the military question,
right?
right? I mean, that
Yes.
you've exposed ownership to great risk if you're not getting this question answered or answered right.
Right.
Now, again, not that they're lying to you, but you can't just slough it off and say, let's check no for everyone because it's going to make my job easier. That's
Yes.
just
And they
not
may just
smart
be in a
or
hurry and
safe.
have missed it, right? The customer
Right,
and the manager
right,
too. Sometimes the managers will be like, "Oh, yeah, it's not that. I don't think they were in the military. They didn't have any uniform on." I'm like, "You don't get this.
that's
You
not,
don't really
right,
understand what's going
right,
on here."
right. And again, I'm accused a lot of being a lot of things, and I've been accused of those things a lot already today. I've had a lot of phone calls. But one thing I'm accused of sometimes is being a fear monger,
Right.
right? Oh, Jeff just does all this to scare us. I don't know, to represent you or something. Well,
Right.
you don't need me to
Keep you
represent
out
you
of
in
trouble.
this. Right. But the point is, I'm not trying to fearmonger when I say that the penalties for violation of the SCRA have both civil and criminal components, meaning not only could the judge advocate general bring a charge against you and say you violated this service member or dependent's rights and we want money, they can actually bring criminal charges against you.
Right.
And who wants to go to jail for running self-storage? That
Right.
just seems like not the right thing to go to jail or prison over.
Right. That's the truth, isn't it?
So if someone is active duty or dependent of someone who's active duty and they go into default, you're going to do everything you can to work with that military member before you start looking at a lien sale process, right? You're going to
Right.
contact them. You're going to contact alternate contacts. You're going to try to contact the commanding officer. And Carol, you're the one who said to me, you've had a lot of luck contacting commanding officers before, correct?
Yes.
And I'm discounting the idea that there might be an opportunity to settle with them and get them out. Please do. But when you just hit wall,
Yeah.
They've blocked you on their cell phone. They're not responding. You don't have a good cell phone number. The emails are bouncing back. The commanding officer isn't willing to help you. You've gone to the Department of Defense Manpower Center. You've run the Social Security number. It appears quite clearly that they are still active duty military. Then the issue becomes you have to file something in court. I recommend using an attorney to ask for permission. But I just want to
Right.
take the listeners through very briefly what happens. The court has primarily three options, but the most common option that they use is they appoint someone to represent the interests of the military member to try to reach them. I've had it called an ombudsman. I've had it called a guardian ad litem. I've had it called a couple other things, but the court appoints someone to be the separate, independent eyes and ears for the military member to try to reach that military member so that the court knows that we're not lying to the court,
Right.
that we've done everything we know how to reach the military member through the contact information we have, through anything else that we could find, through the alternate contact, etc. The court gives the ombudsman or guardian ad litem 90 days to report back. And at 90 days, you have a follow-up hearing where the ombudsman has either reached the military member and the military member is interested in getting their stuff back, in which case, great, get it to them.
Right.
In my opinion, for no charge, as long as you get a release, but just get it out, okay? Or
Yeah.
they've been unsuccessful, in which case the court is basically forced by law to grant you the permission to move forward. Now, the other trick to all this, please remind whatever attorney you're using, is be careful what you ask for in your pleading for relief, because you're going to get it, right? If
Right.
you want to lien sale somebody, you need to say, I'm asking for permission to do a lien sale on this person. If you
Right.
want to evict them through court, you have to ask for that permission, because eventually the judge just signs an order saying motion granted. And if you didn't ask for what you want or the right thing, you're right back where you were.
Right.
You're stuck, and you have to go through the whole thing again and say, I'm sorry, Judge, what I meant to ask for was the right to lien sale them, or the right to do something else, or sue them.
Mm-hmm.
Those the two common ones are lien sale and eviction.
Right.
Right. But be careful what you ask for, because if you get it, that's all you get. The
Right.
judge isn't going to fashion an order saying, oh, I understand self-storage, I'll give you 12 different rights. So
Yeah.
you have to ask for the right thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know what, Jeffrey, I think what I like so much about all of this stuff is what you've done at Late to Lean really helps this whole process, and it takes the manager out of it a bit, right? So tell us a little bit about that, how that works.
So I'm so proud of Late to Lean. Late to Lean is an automated way to do your legal compliant part of a default. So what it basically does is you set the number of days late, and on that day late, every day Late to Lean is pinging your management software. We work with many of the major management softwares, not all. We're pinging you every day, and when someone hits the criteria that you define, 1 to 29 days late and at least $15 in arrears, Late to Lean takes over, and it will manage the compliance part of the default, which means including running a military check so that you know whether they're active duty military or not, running a USPS address scrub to find better addresses. We never delete the address you have of record, but we'll add better addresses if we can find them, right? If someone didn't tell you they moved, but they told People Magazine they moved, we will
Yes.
put that address in and add it for service. Because you got to know what's going on with the Royals at all times. I mean, how can you miss an episode of People Magazine? And then we undertake to do all the required late and lien noticing on time with the right date calculations so that you don't accidentally miscount a date and sell a day too early or advertise a day too late, etc. We send it out the right ways as required by any updated statute. We're always updating. as we record this, this is late September. On September 30th, the Ohio statute changes. On October 1, late to lien will be running
Updated.
the new Ohio statute requirements. So that's our job, not yours anymore, to know about statute changes and so forth. We send the notices out the right way. And then if you want, if it's required in your state, we will advertise the sale for you in the right way, in the right publication, with the right date calculations so that you don't accidentally, like I said, advertise too early, too late.
Right.
Don't count your dates correctly. We're always running algebra on this stuff.
Yes.
To relearn algebra to help our programmers build this thing, because you're working from a front date of what data we want to start, but a back date of what can go wrong. And in a lot of states now where we have newspaper advertising, we're down to one newspaper. They advertise, they run 2 days a week, and their publication deadlines are 2 weeks early. So we had to build all that now into our algorithms whenever we go into a city or an area or a county.
Yeah, that's
where
messy, isn't
there's
it?
a messy newspaper where there's not a daily.
Right.
And then we also want to try to find the least expensive way for you. And so we do all that for you, run it, and then we return it to you. We don't do lien sales. We're not a collection agency.
Right.
So you can use an auctioneer, you can use an online lien sale company, you can do whatever you want. We don't do it. We'll
Right.
data dump to them if you want, but that's as far as we go. So our service promise is that we're responsible for doing the parts that are legally required, the compliant parts according to statute.
Right.
We don't send text messages or do collections or make cold calls to people or anything like that. We're doing the legally compliant part. And the best part is, because a lot of this doesn't matter, but unless we put some guarantee behind it, and we do, we indemnify you, meaning that if there's a claim for a defective notice or a defective ad, if we're running it for you, then we will defend that claim and pay the claim, which no other company that you do business with other than your insurance company will offer that, right?
True.
The online auction companies don't, the software companies don't, any other vendor you work with is not going to agree to indemnify you if they mess something up. And so that's how you can stop being, either becoming or being an expert in lien sales, and it allows you to focus on what you do best, which is customer service, like Carol, auditing, curb appeal, making sure that there aren't weeds growing up in front of your vacants, whatever it is that you need to do to actually run the facility. You're not leaving the office 3 times a week to run to the post office to get certificates of mailing, that you mailed something, so that you know you can do a lien sale 70 something days later, 60 something days later.
Yes.
In a couple states, 90 something days later. It's all done for you.
Okay, so let's, about the SCRA and about relieving that service member of paying rent. Is that true or not true?
Not true. The SCRA does not relieve the service member from paying their rent.
Yeah, some
The
managers
SCRA
think that.
I know. It gives a bundle of rights. Very few of them regularly apply to us. For example, one of the rights is the right to terminate a lease with 30 days notice if you receive a change of station order.
Right.
Or deployed. Well, we don't care about that one. Our leases are all 30-day notice or less anyway, right?
Yeah.
So that's not one of the rights we care about.
Right.
The one we care about is you can't sell somebody who's active duty or a dependent of someone who's active duty while the ride's moving, right?
Right.
Keep your hands and feet inside while the ride is in motion. So that's the one that we really have to worry about, because that's the one that can get us into civil and criminal trouble.
Yeah.
The important thing to remember is that every military member, when they went through boot camp, probably got threatened by a Lewis Gossett looking drill sergeant telling them never to waive their rights under the SCRA.
Right.
Now there is a waiver. The waiver is very difficult to use. And in my experience, most of my clients who think they have good waivers don't, and it makes it worse. So
yes.
Especially if you're a facility that basically caters to a military base, You may
Right.
be asking for these waivers, but you have to make sure you do it absolutely 100% correctly. Okay?
Right.
Um, there's a couple bullet points down here about signing it before the rental agreement is executed and so forth. There are a whole bunch of other requirements. There's type size requirements. There's a requirement that appears to indicate that the waiver must be physically attached to the document over which they're waiving their rights. So it would literally have to
Right.
be paper clipped or stapled. Again, with electronic rentals, I don't know how that
How do we
works.
do that? Right.
Yeah.
That was
And
frustrating for
it
me
has to be
too.
signed, most importantly, by the service member. The
Right.
dependent cannot waive rights under the SCRA.
Right.
So if you think you want to use a waiver, please discuss it with your attorney. Make absolutely sure you're doing it exactly right. Because if
So
you're not,
Jeffrey, I
wrong.
used to have if the wife came in, let's just say if it was the wife that was not in the service. So if the wife came in and she set up the rental agreement and really everything needed to get in, and I said, but still, we need the service member to come in and sign all this information. Is that an okay to do it kind of afterwards or not?
Well, are you talking about getting the waiver signed?
The way, yes, because I felt like the member, who the service member must sign the waiver, but the man, I don't know. I just had them on. Did the rental agreement so they could get their stuff that was already in the truck ready to go into the space, and then I said I still need the service member to come in and sign their waiver. Was that right or wrong?
If it's the waiver, yes. If it's just a rental agreement without a waiver, you don't need the service member to come in.
Right.
The dependent can sign it on their own.
Okay,
But
good.
yeah, I mean, look, I mean, if you can physically get it attached and get it signed by the service member in your presence with their understanding what they're waiving, and they'll sign it, I don't know that I care that, in your example, wife signed it 2 days earlier.
Right. Okay.
Right, they're in, yes, would I like it signed before they take possession? Of
Yes.
course.
Yes.
Do I think that that's a defense that they signed it, that the military member signed it after they moved in? I do not.
Right.
I think they can waive their right at any time.
Yeah.
Of course,
How
they can
about
also withdraw that waiver at any
how
time.
about denying them access?
Yeah, so interestingly, and I'm not sure everyone agrees with me on this, and so certainly you want to talk to your own attorney before doing this, but I believe you take them right to the precipice with the lien sale without selling them to try to get their attention.
Right.
The law says you can't sell them. I don't see anywhere where it says in the law you can't tee them up as if they're going to be sold. And
Yes.
I'm denying them access because I want them to communicate with me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I think part of the supposition you're making here is you're going to deny them access and someone's going to come in screaming and yelling that
Yeah.
you can't do that. Well, fine. Please sign this release and leave.
And then
We're
go.
happy to
Yeah.
let you have your stuff. Just go. Don't let the door hit you.
Right. Yep. The another issue that comes up is just the military service. What does that mean? About, what they have to do minimum wise, how long they have to be in the military, or what do you think about that?
Well, it applies the minute they're active duty.
Right.
Okay. That the general term or hitch, I think is what they call it,
Yeah.
is 6 to 8 years.
Yeah.
But they can always be called back for reserve service for a period of time.
Yeah.
So what we're always balancing is, okay, they're out, but is it possible they're still on reserve? Could they be called up?
Oh,
Should
yeah.
I just go to court and err on the side of not screwing this up and not having someone, judge, advocate, general wise, be upset with me in some way?
Right.
But also, a lot of terms end sooner. Unfortunately, there's
Yes.
a lot of injuries. There's a lot of other
Yep.
reasons that people are discharged before 6 or 8 years or would not be eligible for reserve service.
Yes.
And
That's a good
so
point.
it's all a big mix.
So I think we talked about kind of locating the soldiers, but just even the member information, just You need what the information you need, the individual's full name, the rank, and social security number. We kind of talked about earlier also. But I think, this whole process of getting information and having the right tools, the fact that you know so much about this and you can help us with this, I think it's important for managers to realize that this is out of most of our, the things that we do all the time. So if it is, we should look to someone to get that kind of help. And I really always appreciate your information because it's so thorough. And you've got a lot of experience with where sometimes other attorneys that I've worked with, they're like, yeah, I really haven't worked it that much.
If I'm
Jeffrey,
the
you might laugh at us because in Waikele we had a helipad that we turned into a parking lot, and we had the keys to their vehicles, and we would because they're gone quite a while, and we would actually move the cars a bit so the tires wouldn't get messed up. We made sure that everybody had their car covered, but we tried to keep them in good shape, and we even emailed them saying that we did a check of their vehicle and we sent a picture of their vehicle. So we did a lot of things to help, make them feel comfortable where they were storing stuff. But we did try to keep a lot of contact going with our military people.
So you're the opposite of what we talked about at the beginning, right?
Right.
You're encouraging and fostering good relationships with your military members. And it's smart because that gives you an opportunity to send a communication out once in a while to realize if you've got a problem before the
Right.
problem actually exists. I think my smartest clients are the ones that at least send out a postcard or something every 6 months to all their occupants
Yes.
so that they can catch change of address from the postal service
Yep.
before they expire,
Right.
right? You're staying in touch with your military members. That's brilliant
Yeah.
because A, you're showing you honor their service. B, you have a way to stay in touch with them so that you know if something's gone wrong before it goes too
Yes.
far down the tubes. It's great. I mean, I don't like touching people's cars. I don't like your idea of doing that.
Yeah, I know.
But I do like the regular communication idea and the fact that you
Yeah. And
foster.
we realized that either if they unhooked the battery, that was better than us having to start it, right? We're just leaving it as is.
Right.
I don't know. I know some of the things we do, we take on more liability than we really want to. You know, Jeffrey, I just to kind of wrap this all up, what I really like about all of this is even if you're overwhelmed as a manager or an owner and you're not sure, it just be way easier to use the late to lien service, which would help you with all, not just military, but just with all delinquencies and knowing the lien sale process. And I get lots of calls because of, because probably I speak a lot, you too, but I get lots of calls with about um, here's what I did and now what should I do? Or the guy calls up and say, I'm trying to get rid of this guy, but I don't have a rental agreement on him. I'm like, well, geez, Louise, it like the horse is out of the barn by now, right? And if they could
Right.
just follow some of the things, include, and then add on that late to lien, which would really help them not, and then give them peace of mind that yes, we're at least doing something extra to check and verify that all of this information is good before we sell someone's goods, whether it's a military person or not. I mean, I've made mistakes, and I try to say that I don't, but I have made mistakes sometimes because of just trusting that somebody else did their job, and it wasn't, my eyes looking at something before it's sold. So, and
Yeah,
that's one of our greatest areas that we have liability on in storage, right?
it is. I'll never forget when we first started Late to Lean, one of the first people we took it to was an owner that I respected. And he said, let me get this straight. You're going to take on all the liability that exposes me to $1 million worth of exposure every time I sell somebody. And you're
Yeah.
going to do it for this per use low price.
Right.
He said, sign me up. I'm like, the product doesn't exist yet. We just came to you to see what you thought. He's like, well, get it ready.
Right.
You know, so
Yes.
yeah. I mean, we're very proud of it, and we think I've started calling it as of about a week or two ago, the grown-up way of handling your lien sales.
Right.
You can think of doing it yourself. You can think you're pretty good, but grow up. I mean,
Right.
it's a cost you pass along to your tenants anyway. You just really
Yes.
need to fob that off and focus on what you do right and well, and not risk the exposure.
Right. And the exposure numbers are huge by making lien sale mistakes. I mean that, and it would definitely include all this military stuff too. It's just, I just think that it's so much easier to try preventative things as opposed to, letting the horse out of the barn already, and then you've got a real problem.
Right, right. It's
Horse
it's a
out of the
very
barn.
lonely place to be when you make that decision to sell,
Yeah.
because you're all alone when you do it. But
Right.
you're really lonely when you realize that someone's making a claim against you and you never talked through with anyone, and now you realize your mistake.
Yeah,
Now you just
I've
have to
had to
live
go
with
to
it.
court several times with things like this, things sold, but also with people's stuff damaged. And thank goodness, having a good rental agreement and making sure that there were procedures, that all of, and there lots of documentation, and just like late to lien, all those things help you to ward off any kind of problems you might have. So, what a great
Yeah,
thing.
couldn't agree
Jeffrey,
more.
thank you so much for your time today. I know your time is valuable and you're amazing, and I love to hear you speak, and I love your sense of humor. So it's just always, even though some of your stuff I've heard before, like because we'll be on those tours where we hear stuff, and I hear it over and over, but I still laugh because it's like, it is so funny, some of the things, and you just have a great way of just speaking, and just really great. And I really appreciate you being here today.
I love
So
working with you. Thank you for having me.
yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much.